You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 377, Work Review Extremes Part 2, The Cost of Laissez-Faire Leadership. If you're a small business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Are you constantly surprised by the final results of your team's work? Do you struggle to provide feedback because you're afraid of seeming too controlling? Are projects frequently missing the mark despite hiring talented people? Today, we continue my special 3-part series called Work Review Extremes, where I show you the substantial hidden costs of laissez-faire leadership. You'll discover what drives this hands-off approach, when minimal oversight is actually appropriate, and how to recognize when you've crossed the line into problematic neglect. To make sure you're not swinging between extremes, I've created the Balanced Leadership Work Review Guide, a free resource to help you lead with clarity and intention. In Part 3, I'll walk you through how to use it in detail, but you can go get it now. Get ahead, download it now, be sure you have it. It includes printable power sheets, a matrix to guide your review decisions, and step-by-step instructions to help you implement balanced leadership across your team. Go grab that now by heading on over to amberdelagarza.com/work review. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/work review. And now, let's get to the straight talk. In this second episode of my Work Review Extreme series, we'll explore the other end of the leadership spectrum, the tendency to be too hands-off or laissez-faire when reviewing your team's work. This is something I hear about regularly from business owners who believe they're empowering their team by stepping back, but are frustrated by inconsistent results and missed expectations. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been surprised by the final outcome of a project because you weren't involved throughout the process? Or felt hesitant to provide feedback because you didn't want to micromanage? If you're nodding, you might be a laissez-faire leader, and you're experiencing the common dilemma that begs the question, how do you empower your team while still ensuring quality and alignment? The truth is, while micromanaging can stifle your team, completely disengaging can be equally damaging. It's about finding the crucial middle ground, that sweet spot. Today, we'll explore why hands-off approach often backfires, what drives this leadership style, and when minimal oversight is actually appropriate versus when it's problematic neglect. Laissez-faire leadership happens when your legitimate need to give team members autonomy crosses into excessive disengagement. Let's look at how this specifically shows up while reviewing your team members' work, a critical point where many leaders struggle to find balance. Next, I'm going to share with you signs that you may be too hands-off with your team's work review. You rarely check in on progress until the work is completely finished. You may provide vague or minimal guidelines at the start of the project, expecting team members to just figure out all the details themselves. Your feedback is often sparse or non-existent, leaving team members uncertain about their performance. You may tend to avoid difficult conversations about work quality, hoping that issues will just magically resolve themselves? You feel uncomfortable providing direction because you don't want to be seen as micromanaging? You may have adopted a sink or swim mentality, believing team members should learn primarily through their own mistakes. You frequently say things like, just handle it, or I trust that you'll figure it out, without providing necessary context or resources. You don't have clear quality standards or regular check-in points established for projects. You may feel relieved when team members don't ask you questions because it means less work for you. And finally, you're often surprised by the final work product because you weren't aware of the direction that it was taken. You're taken by surprise when the project is done, when in fact you weren't actually involved throughout the process at all. So I bet you're wanting to know, what are the hidden business costs? A laissez-faire work review approach damages your business in subtle but significant ways. Let's dive in. Quality inconsistency. Without clear standards and regular check-ins, work quality varies dramatically across team members and projects, creating an inconsistent client experience. Misaligned deliverables. Projects frequently miss the mark because team members lack sufficient direction to understand the true objective, resulting in wasted time and resources. Delayed problem identification. Issues that could have been caught and corrected early in the process become major problems that require extensive rework or, in fact, damage the client relationships. How about team frustration and anxiety? Contrary to popular belief, most employees don't want complete freedom. I'm going to say that again. Contrary to popular belief, most employees don't want complete freedom. They want appropriate guidance. Without it, they feel unsupported and uncertain about their own performance. And truly, if you have a good team member, they just want to do a good job and they want to know they're doing a good job. Insufficient skill development. Team members develop skills through trial and error rather than guided learning, significantly extending the time that it takes for them to be proficient. And I would argue that this inefficient skill development is actually causing you far more frustration. Poor resource allocation. Without regular oversight, team members may spend excessive time on minor aspects of projects while rushing through critical components. Avoidance culture. The leaders, yours as the business owners, hesitation to provide feedback creates a workplace where difficult conversations are postponed or actually avoided entirely, allowing problems to fester, and often resentment. Client dissatisfaction. Clients receive products or services that haven't been properly reviewed, leading to complaints, revision requests, and damaged relationships. How about talent exodus? High-performing team members often leave organizations where they don't receive significant guidance or recognition. And this is an expensive turnover cost to you, the business owner, and the business. Talking about costs, let's talk about revenue leakage. Without proper oversight, pricing decisions, scope management, and resource allocation often default to whatever is easiest rather than what is most profitable. Brand dilution. Not only are you going to have unhappy clients, but inconsistent work quality and delivery undermines your overall brand standards and weakens marketing position over time. You have built a business, you have built a brand, and it can be absolutely wrecked by this type of leadership. Crisis management default. The business operates in a reactive mode, with leadership only engaging when serious problems arise rather than preventing them. And you know that I am a huge proponent of proactive behavior in the business versus reactive behavior. Let's dive into the perception problem. Perhaps most damaging of all is how your team interprets hands-off leadership. When you consistently fail to engage with your team's work, they often perceive it as you simply don't care, even when that's not actually the case. This misperception creates a dangerous cascade effect. If the owner doesn't care about quality, why should I? And this attitude quickly spreads, undermining your culture and eroding internal standards across the entire team. I gotta tell you, I have personal experience with laissez-faire or hands-off leadership. When I was in college, I was an office manager for a real estate team, and it was a couple, and they had been in business for a very long time, and by all standards, very successful. And when I came in, I started as an assistant and then moved up to office manager. And before I knew it, because I did have a specific skill set, I was incredibly responsible, and I just kept taking on more and more responsibilities, it actually created a dysfunctional relationship in that the leadership became so hands-off that I found myself updating them about their own business and transactions sitting at the edge of their bed at their house, because they would no longer come into the office, because I was begging for them to be included in the decisions and understand what was going on. And so I would start my day with, back in those days, big old stack of file folders, reviewing transactions and talking to them about their business. And while you may think, oh my gosh, that would be amazing to have an assistant that just catered to me and came into my home and just laid it all out, what was really happening was they were losing full control of their business because of the leadership style that they fell into. And while I, honestly probably was pretty qualified to handle the day-to-day, it was not my business. And it built up resentment. And it ultimately, I had all those thoughts. I care so much, but they don't care. And if they don't care, why should I care? And therefore, it became an incredibly dysfunctional relationship. And look, I'm a little biased, but they squandered what I would think is me, a good employee that was willing to partner with them to build an incredible business. But they squandered it away because they became so hands-off and kind of took advantage of the fact that I was able to handle so much, but didn't realize that it wasn't my business. I wasn't getting an upside of my business growing. I just got the upside of my ethics, where I was a hard worker. I wanted to do right. I loved a good challenge. And in the end of the day, I was definitely more invested in the business than they were. And when I left, it was very detrimental to their business. And I knew that. And that's why I stayed longer than I did, because I actually cared about them and I cared about the business. But the truth is that the culture that was created and the relationship that was being built with this kind of leadership, there was no other way but for me to leave. So the business took a huge dive after I left. And unfortunately, after being in business for almost 20 years, they actually closed the business shortly after me leaving. I share that story to tell you that, you may have incredibly talented people on your team. You may have people on your team that you trust, and that is a good thing. But no matter where you're at, they want to know that you care. And they're going to know that you care when you're involved, when you're giving guidance, and when you can be supportive. And ultimately, 20 years later, I'm making this work review series all about the balanced leader. And I wish that they understood that at that time, my previous bosses. I wish I understood that. I didn't actually understand in the moment what was going on. I just knew how I felt. So, what are you going to do about it if you're finding yourself as being a hands-off leader? The ultimate irony is that laissez-faire review often requires more time and energy than a balanced approach. When problems inevitably arise, you'll need to invest significant effort in crisis management, relationship repair, and extensive rework, far more than would have been required for appropriate ongoing oversight. Now that we understand what laissez-faire leadership looks like when reviewing your team's work and the substantial hidden costs, let's explore what drives this behavior and when more hands-off approach is actually appropriate versus when it becomes problematic neglect. To move beyond laissez-faire approach to reviewing your team's work, we need to understand what drives this behavior and recognize when minimal oversight is appropriate versus when it becomes problematic neglect. So let's start off with what drives hands-off leadership. The autonomy illusion. Many business owners mistake laissez-faire leadership for giving autonomy or empowering the team. But true autonomy requires context, clarity, and appropriate support, none of which exists in a hands-off environment. The overcorrection factor. Many business owners who previously micromanaged or were micromanaged themselves swing too far to the opposite side, adopting an extremely hands-off approach in an attempt to avoid being controlling. Avoidance of difficult conversations. I'd actually have to say that in the work that I do, this might be one of the most common reasons. Providing constructive feedback requires emotional energy and can create tension. Some leaders avoid, and I would argue at all costs, avoid reviewing work altogether rather than navigating potentially uncomfortable interactions. The hire and hope mindset. After investing time in hiring someone you believe is qualified, there's a tendency to step back entirely with the expectation that they'll figure everything out independently. A couple good examples of this is that I would hear a client or a business owner say, well, they worked at ABC company. They held XYZ position. Of course they know what to do. Of course they don't need me in their business. And the truth is that somebody can be incredibly qualified for the role, but they still need to understand how your business operates. What are your personal expectations? What are the processes that are unique to your company? Lack of confidence in your expertise. Some leaders hesitate to provide guidance because they doubt their own knowledge and worry about imposing their ways of doing things on others. So this one is also, I would say, is up there in like a top 3, especially in a role that maybe you don't fill or feels really outside of your comfort level. And this is where you don't need to know how to do everything in your business, but you do need to understand the basics of each of the roles in the business to know enough to be able to explain what good work looks like, or to understand when someone is doing a good job or needs feedback. And you as a leader are absolutely capable of doing that, even if you don't actually know how to do all the details of that role. Emotional exhaustion. When you're burning out or emotionally depleted, the energy required for thoughtful review and feedback can feel overwhelming and leading to disengagement. So this is one of those unintended consequences of burning both ends of the candle or being burnt out in general in the business, is disengagement in your leadership style. The overextended leader. So this might lean more towards how do you get burned out, but the overextended leader is simply not available because they have too many competing priorities. And they often default to a hands-off approach because they lack the bandwidth for proper engagement. Now I want to switch to some dangerous belief systems. And these are specific thought patterns that tend to reinforce and justify laissez-faire leadership. Beliefs and thoughts like, they'll ask if they need help. This assumes team members always know when they're stuck and feel comfortable asking for guidance. And I got to tell you, many don't, especially if you are running on overextended, overexhausted, and unavailable. Most employees do not want to inconvenience you, and they don't know when the right time is to ask questions, so they tend to not ask. So this dangerous belief is they'll ask if they need help. Next, no news is good news. This is a dangerous assumption that leads to discovering problems only when they've become serious. And I think you're going to know this. So if you've had team members and they either quit or you finally fired them, it's only then that you realize how bad things actually were if you weren't looking, right? So you do not want to lean into no news is good news. You always want to understand what is happening, being engaged with your team member so that you can see things coming before they surprise you. Next, I need to focus on revenue generating activities. Now, I'm not going to argue with that. Absolutely. As a leader, you need to be focusing on revenue generating activities. And while this is true, this belief creates a false dichotomy between leadership and business growth. And I have a framework that I have been teaching for a very, very long time, and it's how to identify where you will find your highest value activities as a business owner. And when I first rolled this framework out, I have to tell you, it didn't include leadership because in my mind, I guess I was just assuming leadership was an obvious high value activity. And what was in there was marketing visibility, it was sales, it was servicing the clients. And I revised that framework because I was hearing things like, oh my gosh, I keep getting, like, if I have to train another employee, hire another employee, coach another employee, answer another question, review work again. And it was these subtle things that were being said as if that is not a good use of your time. And so if you have not already listened to that episode, we'll be sure to link out to that in the show notes of how to find your highest value activities and what those buckets are and why they matter. But one of the buckets, and the bucket that actually as your business is growing, maturing, and scaling that you will spend most of your time in is going to be leadership. And I will have to tell you this. Where else are you going to invest time and get more of a multiplier on your ROI? Where when you invest in someone, they're able to go do hours of work. When you invest in someone, they're able to support you in ways that you wouldn't be able to do that level of work by yourself. There's a huge ROI on leadership activities. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox, but they are not opposite. Focusing on revenue generating activities, leadership is up there because your team is helping you generate revenue. And more importantly, when they're running efficiently, they're keeping more of the profit or creating more profit for your business so that you don't have to create as much revenue because they're running efficiently. It's kind of full circle there. All right, I said I'm getting off my soapbox. I'm off. Let's wrap this up with a couple last thoughts. Thoughts like, or beliefs, my team doesn't want me looking over their shoulder. This conflates appropriate guidance with micromanagement. They're not the same. And lastly, I hired experts so I don't have to be involved. We kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. This is really a misunderstanding that expertise still requires proper context and direction. It's important to know that not all hands-off reviewing is bad. And I think you know that. There are going to be times, legitimate times, when minimal oversight serves a valuable purpose. So let's dive into when hands-off reviewing is actually more appropriate for that situation. First, Routine and low-risk tasks. For repetitive tasks where team members have demonstrated consistent competence, so consistently showing up, doing it right, minimal oversight allows efficiency and builds confidence for your team members. Creative development phases. During initial brainstorming and exploration stages, too much review can actually stifle the creativity and innovation. Team building opportunities. Sometimes stepping back deliberately creates space for team members to develop problem-solving abilities and confidence. Technical expertise areas. When team members have specialized knowledge that exceeds yours, a more collaborative approach to review with fewer directives may be more effective. Trusted, experienced team members. With proven performers who consistently deliver quality work, lighter review processes acknowledge their expertise and maintain efficiency. When unsure if your hands-off approach is appropriate, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. Am I stepping back because it serves the team member and the business, or because it serves my own comfort? 2, does my level of oversight match the task's importance, complexity, and the team member's experience level? If your hands-off approach is primarily serving your comfort, or doesn't match the situation's requirement, it's probably time to increase your engagement. Now we've covered a lot of ground today in part 2 of my Work Review Extreme series. Let's recap the key insights about why a laissez-faire approach to reviewing your team's work is often problematic for your business. First, we identified what hands-off leadership looks like when reviewing your team's work and explored the many hidden costs, from inconsistent quality to the dangerous perception that you simply don't care about standards or outcomes. Second, we examined what drives this behavior, what your triggers are, and importantly, when more hands-off approach is actually appropriate versus when it just crosses the line into problematic neglect. Remember, neither extreme, overbearing leadership that we discussed in part 1, nor laissez-faire approach that we covered today creates the ultimate environment for your team to thrive. I'm so excited about this next episode. In our next episode, which will be part 3 of my Work Review Extreme series, we'll explore that powerful middle ground, the balanced leadership approach that provides both structure and autonomy your team needs to produce their best work. And to help you put that balanced approach into action, I've created a free resource, the Balanced Leadership Work Review Guide. It includes printable power sheets, a review matrix, detailed examples, and step-by-step instructions you can start using with your team right away. I'll walk you through the full framework in part 3, but you can get your hands on it and download it right now. So go grab this guide at amberdelagarza.com/work review. Again, that's amberdelagarza.com/work review so that you're ready to follow along and apply what you're learning in this series. Understanding the costs of laissez-faire leadership is a crucial step forward in finding the ideal middle ground in how you review your team's work. As you reflect on your own leadership style, remember that your goal isn't to avoid micromanaging at all costs, but rather to create an environment where your team feels both supported and trusted. I have loved having you listen to this episode of the Small Business Straight Talk podcast, and I sure hope you found this part 2 of this series to be incredibly valuable. But I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So today, I invite you to observe your work review habits over the next week. Pay attention to when you might be disengaging due to discomfort rather than because it serves the team member or project. Choose one project where you have been hands-off and schedule a brief check-in with your team members to provide some structure, guidance, or feedback. This small step towards balanced leadership can make a significant difference in both the quality of the final product and your team members' confidence. If you are new here, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode and specifically this Work Review Extreme series, be sure to share it with a fellow business owner who you think would find it valuable. So that's my Straight Talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.